You're listening to 91 Reasons, a journey into the twisted landscape of pop culture. Keep your hands and arms inside the podcast at all times. And now, the voice, Jeff Tucker.
Well, I have to tell you, I flip-flopped a lot this week about what would the episode be, and I had this big thing planned. I was going to do this singular topic, but something happened along the way, and this might be the first episode, other than like Comic-Con, where something gets derailed or plans get derailed because something actually happened, you know. And this week it was simply that I got up and I go to all these movie sites. You know, I have a morning ritual of all these movie sites that I check out. Ain't It Cool, Dark Horizon, Cinema Blend, HitFix. Just trying to digest as much new movie information as I can. And I stumbled across a story that didn't get bigger until the next day or the day after, but Glen A. Larsen died. And, you know, half the people listening, or more than half, are shaking their heads like, who the heck is Glen A. Larsen? Well, Glen A. Larsen was one of those guys where even if you didn't know his name, you knew his work. Now, he was an older guy. He was 77. He died of cancer. But Glen A. Larsen, when his name was on something, you knew you were going to enjoy it. Because as a kid, you know, you've heard me talk about the old days and my my rotary phone and my single area code in my whole entire area, and the way things were just different back then. And the main way things were different is that across the board, we had less choice. There were less choices of things to do, to imbibe, to ingest, to enjoy, to endure. Just less of everything, less choice. Nowadays, kids can watch anything they want, listen to anything they want, anytime, doesn't matter. Everything's available. Every major company wants every product to be available. You know, stores are open 24 hours. We want to make sure that if you need something at a given time, you can get it right at that time. It doesn't matter what it is. It's not like when I was a kid where if you wanted to watch It's the Great Pumpkin, Charlie Brown, you had to wait till it was broadcast on TV. And it was usually shown one time, and that's it. So you planned your whole week around it. There was no other option, you know. There wasn't the idea that you could put in Star Wars at any time into a VCR, DVD, Blu-ray. You watched what was on TV, or you went to the movies, or more than not, you went outside and played. You know, you played Star Wars. We played Star Wars 1,000 times more than we watched Star Wars. And that's where our Star Wars lore came from. Seriously. Between the toys and using a stick for a lightsaber, or a wrapping paper tube for a lightsaber, we played Star Wars infinitely more than we watched Star Wars, because it simply wasn't available. And the way that we supplemented the stuff that we couldn't get, we substituted the stuff that we could get. And Glen A. Larsen was the chief dealer in stuff that we could get in lieu of the stuff we couldn't get. And what I mean by that was Mr. Larsen, God rest his soul, he watched big hit movies, and then he made TV shows that were kind of like it. So if you kind of liked what was on the movies, at the movies, there would be something on TV for you. Now, he's probably most famous for, the $6 Million Man. I mean, this guy created the $6 Million Man. He read some books, these little known books, and he turned them into this giant mega TV franchise that spawned the Bionic Woman, and more importantly for my generation, lots of toys. The Bionic Man, the $6 Million Man, was probably the biggest TV merchandised property of the 70s, no doubt. Now, being born in 71, I was at the tail end of that, I'll be honest. The toys were big 12-inch dolls. They were expensive. The accessories for them were even more expensive. He had a little chamber he could go in. They experimented with like a play set that was a blow-up house. But I had a few. I had a few $6 Million Man toys, but I was still, I'm still too young for that kind of stuff. I didn't really hit the idea of picking what I wanted for certain until Star Wars. 1977, I was 6, or the toys came out the next year, so I was 6.5, almost 7, and I could tell my mom, look, this is what I want. And that's an important distinction because Mr. Larsen had done the $6 Million Man, which was on TV and was important because we watched it all the time, and every kid on the playground. Because I think by the time I got old enough to play $6 Million Man, it was in syndication. So we would run in slow motion. Yeah, that's what we did as kids. And the next big show that would matter to me, and he had other shows, like he did a show called McCloud where Dennis Weaver played a country cop in the big city. But the next one that really hit, now he did have Quincy with Jack Klugman as like a medical examiner, the coroner. And my mom loved Quincy, so we watched Quincy a lot. And I don't know if I've ever talked about it, but there's this unwritten rule that every time you show a coroner in any property, TV or movie, he's usually eating a sandwich. And that's supposed to let you know that he's so comfortable around dead bodies that he can eat a sandwich while he's working. And I think Klugman ate in every scene of Quincy. But the opening credits were great because he would say, "Welcome to the world of forensic medicine." And he would start dissecting the body just off screen. But you'd see like the first year students one by one fainting. And gosh, I haven't thought about that in 30 plus years. It just came to me right now. That's so weird. Now I have to tell you, just like I did with the John Hughes episode, I am looking at Glen A. Larsen's IMDb page. But you know what? Just like John Hughes' page, this thing is enormous. Like, this guy was so prolific and so busy with so many projects, but he wouldn't really hit the radar. Now he hit the radar briefly with the Hardy Boys Nancy Drew mysteries, because I did watch those and I really liked them, and I think they appealed to the fact that I used to spend part of my summer reading the Hardy Boys mystery books. I know, I'm a nerd. I spent summer reading. I did. I think I read, 30 or 40 of them at a clip. But I also thought that those guys were cool. They were hip guys and they were smart. And even at a young age, I was very into shows where the characters were smart. I'm not really into dumb TV. Beavis and Butthead notwithstanding, I enjoy watching the adventures of smart people. And, the exception would be Beavis and Butthead and probably Homer Simpson. But I like the Hardy Boys. And a real weird fact that the Sean Cassidy Hardy Boys doll uses it is the body that they used on the Luke Skywalker 12-inch doll. And it's weird, like, my favorite toy from like 1978 to 80 was the 12-inch Luke Skywalker doll. I love the figures, I love the play sets and the vehicles, but there was just something bigger than life with the 12-inch doll and all the accessories that he came with. So you can imagine when I finally saw a Hardy Boys Sean Cassidy doll, he has Luke's exact body. I'm like, oh, this one came out first, so that's where they got the body from. So it's weird to think, like, even back then they were reusing molds, and Kenner would do that again and again with using Star Wars toys to make Robin Hood Prince of Thieves toys, and Superpowers toys to make Robin Hood Prince of Thieves toys, and all the different ways they reuse molds again and again. And Batman, taking a Batman mold and cranking out as many different colors of Batman as you can. Give me a break. They had an orange Batman that came with a parachute. Like, Batman needed to be orange and parachuting out of the sky. Hey, thanks, Kenner. Nice job. I'm going to applaud that. Nice job, Kenner. That's so realistic in the Batman world. Anyways, getting back to Glen Larsen, he really hit the playground map with Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica, and it's weird to think, like, he did so many projects, but Battlestar Galactica will be the one he's remembered for most because it's the one that came back in the biggest way. But the original Battlestar Galactica was a revelation on TV because all of us kids would watch it. Now, we knew even in 1978. Now, this thing came out as like a quick movie and a comic book series and trading cards, and then it immediately hit on TV. So if you missed it in the theater, and a lot of us kids did, it was immediately on TV because the whole idea was just to throw out a quickie, thrown together, couple episode movie, and then get it on TV as fast as you can so that they can compete directly with Star Wars. And us kids were savvy enough to know that it was a ripoff of Star Wars. We would just watch it and go, this is a ripoff of Star Wars. But the important thing was we were watching it. And Mattel had all the Battlestar Galactica toys. And they weren't as detailed as Star Wars figures, but they were the same scale. So a lot of times, and this is exactly what they wanted. This is exactly what Universal wanted. A lot of times when you had a birthday, the adults would head to the toy store. They head to Toys R Us or Zodi's or Kmart, and the Battlestar Galactica toys were right next to the Star Wars toys. And if you didn't know exactly what you were supposed to be buying, they would just buy Battlestar Galactica figures. You know what? I don't know for a fact, but I bet they were 25 cents cheaper. Anything to confuse the consumer right on the shelf. So I got a lot of those Battlestar Galactica toys in 78, 79, and I didn't mind because, they were just like Star Wars toys. I got a lot of the Avion, the four-armed green bug thing, and he's fine because he sat right in the cantina with Greedo. I'm sure they shared a blue milk a dozen or more times when I played figures. But Galactica had all the archetypes of Star Wars, Apollo, the good guy, was kind of like Luke, and Starbuck was a little like Han Solo, and they had Daggett, which was the Chewbacca furry thing, and Adama was Obi-Wan. Like, they were all there. Even the vehicles, the vehicles were so close. Not so much the Cylon Raider, which looked like a flying saucer, but the Colonial Viper looked like an X-Wing with the wings cut off. So these toys and this property, exactly like Glen A. Larsen wanted, just fit neatly right alongside Star Wars. And us kids, it didn't matter to us, because even if you were aware that Galactica was a pale imitation of Star Wars, we were still watching. And oh man, I'm trying to remember. I think it was on Sunday at 7:00. Like it was designed for kids, because I knew some yo-yo kids whose parents made them go to bed at 8 o'clock. So having it on at 7 o'clock meant that even the overprotective parents were going to allow their kids to watch it. And oh, did we watch this movie. And I have to tell you that Galactica had so many good things going for it. And there's a reason why it's remembered so fondly. If you ask me, like, what's the main reason you remember Galactica? Well, the first thing is obviously all the space stuff. You know, the Galactica itself is a beautiful design. The Colonial Vipers, the Cylon Raiders, all the space dogfights, even though eventually even kids realized they were reusing the same shots over and over again. It didn't matter because the context was usually different. But it was space fights. And the other great thing about Galactica was Dirk Benedict. Dirk Benedict was so cool. He would play that Sabacc card game with everybody, and he would bet credits, and he would smoke a cigar, and it was like watching Han Solo every week, but he didn't look like Han Solo. You know, I would assume they deliberately made Starbuck blonde and Apollo dark haired to go the opposite way that Star Wars did. But Dirk Benedict was just so cool, and he smoked a cigar, and he flew a Colonial Viper, and he had that really cool Egyptian-themed helmet that they put on. Remember, they would put their helmets on, and the helmet would light up when they put it on, and then they would launch out of the Galactica, and that fiery launch that was like a going off of a battle cruiser on the ocean, you know, an aircraft carrier. Galactica was just sci-fi that we could relate to. It was watered down, candy-colored sci-fi that was on TV every week. So we watched it, and there were many days where we would alternate on the playground. Okay, we're not going to play Star Wars today. We're going to do Galactica. All right, you're the Cylons, and we're the Earth people, the Colonials, looking for Earth. And look at the Cylons, man. The Cylons are so cool. And if you ever got hold of a harmonica, you would pretend to talk like a Cylon, because that's what they talk like. And gosh, I just remember so many good memories of watching Galactica, like just hunkered down in front of the TV, not wanting to move a muscle while it was on. And Galactica was also dark, you know. They didn't have a home. They were looking for Earth, and it just had a cool vibe. Now, later I would learn that Glen A. Larsen was Mormon, and a lot of the Battlestar Galactica stuff was taken from the Mormon faith and the Mormon beliefs. And, you know, good for him. Good for him for taking his faith and rearranging it a little fictionally to put this show together. Because everyone I knew that I grew up with was Christian. So we had no idea we were being fed a Mormon diet on TV. It didn't matter to us. We weren't looking for that. So it still doesn't bother me. It's fine. But yeah, Galactica lasted a couple of years, and then, like with anything, interest waned, and they were going to cancel it. Now, Glen A. Larsen had such a knack for not taking no for an answer. And I don't know how many times he tried to get these shows on the air and how many failed. I'm not, I can't celebrate the entire life of Glen A. Larsen. I can simply celebrate the parts that affected me and how he really gave me what I wanted to see on TV. But when I can assume when faced with cancellation, he went to the studio and said, look, you want to cancel the show? That's fine. What if I could cut the budget for this thing down to almost, nothing for making a sci-fi show, and we can keep it on the air? And Universal, they must have said, sure. Why not? Because we went from Battlestar Galactica being a show set entirely in space, where the ragtag fleet is looking for home, Earth, with aliens and spaceships and exotic locales and sets. Everything on Galactica had to have a new set. We went from that to Galactica 80, 1980, where, guess what? They found Earth. Miracle. So the whole show now takes place on Earth. And it stars Apollo and Starbuck's kids. And you know what? I watched that too. They had flying motorcycles on that show. Flying motorcycles. They had no spaceships anymore, but they had flying motorcycles. And how unbelievably cool is that? And I'll tell you something. I'll tell you a really quick, funny story. Around 90, 91, 92, I started getting back into collecting in a big way. Like, I had emerged from being overly obsessed with girls my entire teenage years to settling down and becoming older and becoming a collector of toys. So I used to get The Recycler every week. The Recycler is one of those newspaper publications that's real thick, and it's just stuff for sale. It's mostly a lot of cars, but they also have sections for collectibles, toys, and every kind of thing. So it came out Thursday morning, and I would go every Thursday morning to be the first guy to get The Recycler, because if there was something good in there, you had to call right away to get it. And I used to call and buy Star Wars collections. I would call, because remember back then, this stuff, people were just clearing this stuff out. So it would say, Star Wars collection, $40. And I would call, and I got, what do you got? Well, yeah, I got a box of little action figurines and a couple of these spaceships. And I'd go, I'll be right over. And I would go right over and I would buy it and revel in all the stuff that I got. But I used to see an ad in The Recycler every week, and it was for one of the Galactica 80 flying motorcycles. It was a regular motorcycle with the flying rig, out of fiberglass put over it. He wanted like $2,000 for it. Oh my God. I can remember looking at that and saying, how can I get $2,000? I can't. That minimum wage was $4.35. There was no way I was going to have enough money to buy that motorcycle. But it was in there like at least 4, 5, 6 weeks, that guy trying to find a buyer for it. What do you think that motorcycle goes for now? I bet now it's $15,000, $20,000. Same thing. Same motorcycle. But I had a shot, man. I had a shot to buy it, and I couldn't put it together. But Galactica 80 is not very good. Even us kids realize it's cheap now. These aren't the same actors. Yeah, Lorne Green's there, but it's not the same vibe, not the same actors. But Galactica 80 is famous for one episode. And when you see Galactica in any way on syndication, a lot of times they don't include the Galactica 80 episodes in the syndication package. But they do include the single anomaly episode, Starbuck's Return. And I've seen this episode a lot, and it's a great episode. I don't know. I'm sure there's a story behind it, and if I did a lot of research, I could figure it out. But I'm going to assume that they had filmed this episode during the Galactica run, and they didn't know what to do with it, or they just wanted to bring Dirk Benedict back in some way. So it opens with Starbuck's kid asking Adama about his father, and Adama telling this story, and then then we flash back. But the story is basically Enemy Mine. Now, Enemy Mine came out 84, 85, so this is long before then. And it concerns a single battle where Starbuck is battling these Cylons, and both ships are incapacitated, and Starbuck crash lands on this planet, and it's almost like Robinson Crusoe, where he has to make shelter and find food and water, and he ends up finding a woman and basically I think making her his wife and fathering the child that we see in Galactica 80. But the really cool part about it is that he eventually goes over to the downed Cylon Raider, and he salvages enough parts to make one Cylon, and he turns it on and it tries to kill him, and then he reprograms it, and the Cylon becomes his friend, and he names him Psi. And the episode is Starbuck and Psi as friends. And as a kid, I don't know if I got the big message of we're not that different and why are we fighting, but I did get the message of this is a really decidedly different episode, and the themes here are much deeper than what we've seen on the episodes before, and certainly much deeper than Galactica 80, which was basically just schlock. It was basically chips if they could fly into the air. But that Return of Starbuck episode is really good, and it ends with Cylons attacking, and finding like a homing beacon and attacking, and Psi has to give up his life for Starbuck and Starbuck's wife, which he calls Woman, and the baby. And Psi gives up his life, and it's really, really traumatic. And I can remember even as a kid being really affected by that episode, like 44 minutes of mild sci-fi ends with this horrific death of this character that we've come to love. And boy, I was really affected. And every time, if I see that episode like on Sci-Fi Channel or one of those weird off channels, if it's the Return of Starbuck, I will watch it, because it may be the best episode of the entire series, the original series. But yeah, Battlestar Galactica made a big impression on any kid my age. Getting sci-fi on TV every week was such a big deal.
The year is 1987, and NASA launches the last of America's deep space probes. In a freak mishap, Ranger 3 and its pilot, Captain William Buck Rogers, are blown out of their trajectory into an orbit which freezes his life support systems and returns Buck Rogers to Earth 500 years later.
But the next Glen A. Larsen project would resonate with me and a lot of guys in my generation for a completely different reason. I remember we went and saw Buck Rogers in the 25th Century on the big screen. That's the Jill Gerard, Aaron Gray TV show. It was originally a movie. They used the same model as Galactica, where they stitched a couple of episodes together and made a movie and rushed it to theaters. And this was the summer before The Empire Strikes Back, so we're 2 years out from the release of Star Wars. So any kid my age was really jonesing for some good sci-fi on the big screen. And Buck Rogers promised all of that and more. So I begged my stepdad Jerry to take me, and it's not a bad movie, As a TV, if you take the pilot episode of Buck Rogers, the one that was turned into the movie, and you play it on TV, it looks and is a very expensive TV pilot. By theatrical standards, it's low budget. So it lives in that weird line between low-budget movie and big-budget TV show. But Buck Rogers was great, had a great theme song, and a good story of the everyman astronaut who is frozen and wakes up in the future. And the best part about that is simply they get to spend the whole series explaining things to Buck, which means they're explaining things to us, the audience. That way, the exposition is covered very organically in, hey, Buck needs to know this, which means wink, wink, the audience needs to know this. And the movie's about him waking up and being promised to marry Princess Ardella, and all the main characters are there. And you know what? Mattel, for whatever reason, passed on this as a toy line, but Mego Mego picked it up because in the late 70s, after Mego passed on Star Wars, dummies, Mego tried to pick up every major sci-fi license thinking one of these has to hit. So they ended up picking up Star Trek the Motion Picture, The Black Hole, Buck Rogers, and who knows how. I mean, there were a lot of others, but 79 was a big year. I mean, that was also the year of Motion Picture and Black Hole, and everybody had finally watched Star Wars rake in all this money for over a full year and become the number one film of all time. So they all wanted in on it. So by 79, everybody was putting out sci-fi product, you know. And I could do a whole episode on Black Hole and how insane it is that a Disney movie ends with the bad guy literally going to hell, and they show it on screen. But we're talking about Glen A. Larsen. And Glen A. Larsen's contribution to that mix, he already had Galactica going full tilt on TV. So what better way to fill his pockets than with another sci-fi series? And I guess either Universal owned the rights to Buck Rogers or he was able to buy the rights to Buck Rogers. Because I know that when Lucas was putting Star Wars together, the first thing he did was try to buy the rights to Buck Rogers and was told no. But no matter who owned it, after they saw the box office receipts of Star Wars, Buck Rogers was going to come back. No question. And it did. And the episode, the movie, the pilot, it's very well done, very expensive. The spaceships are totally different. I love the Earth ship design. It's reminiscent of a snowspeeder, but a little different. The Draconian Marauders kind of look like brown X-Wings, but they're the bad guy ships, so it's okay. But Mego did all the toys, and they were fun toys to get. Now, they did use that weird Mego / G.I. Joe body where there's a rubber band in the middle. So a lot of them they have not aged well. Unless you get that rubber band replaced, most of those figures from that time period, the rubber band rots and the figure just falls in half. But hey, they had toys, and again, they were the same scale as Star Wars figures. So if your weird aunt screwed up and bought you Buck Rogers toys instead of Star Wars toys, it didn't matter because they all fit in them, just like any other. You could put Bosk inside a Draconian Marauder, just like any other figure. And how do I know that? Because that's what I did. My friend George Fox and I used to get together with our Star Wars toys, and he had the play sets and vehicles that I didn't have, and vice versa. So together we had nearly everything. Real quick, George Fox had the remote control Sandcrawler, the, I think, most expensive Kenner vehicle or playset or whatever of the entire Star Wars line. I think it was $50 when it came out in 79, 78. You can imagine what was minimum wage back then? $2. So you're talking about nearly 25 hours of your parents' work, if they earn minimum wage, to buy this toy. So not a lot of kids got it. And you know what? The Sandcrawler is one of the few Kenner Star Wars toys that I have never owned. I've never been able to get one at a price that I was comfortable with, so I've never owned one. It sucks because it's a great toy. Holds all your Jawas and all your droids. I'm sorry, I'm digressing. When I think about never having that Sandcrawler, I just I want one right now. I want to buy one right now. Even the couple of times they reissued the Sandcrawler, it was too expensive. I saw one at Hot Topic once. Hot Topic. And it was $75. And that was for the Sandcrawler. The new ones, they gutted all the RC components. So it was just a plastic vehicle. Not that I want to race it along the floor, but it lost some of the heft to it. The wheels and the electronics gave the toy heft. So it felt like it was worth $50. The new one at $75 doesn't feel like it was worth $75. And I think on eBay, they're still around that same price. They've never gone down in price. But Buck Rogers was great. It had Tweaky, the little robot, and Tweaky had Dr. Theopolis around his neck. So there you have your C-3PO and R2-D2 clone right in one little package. And I would tune into Buck Rogers every week for now I'm gonna say it was the sci-fi action, because they would fly out. The people of Earth would have to make contact with somebody, so they would take their ships and fly out. And the kids of my generation, we did pick up on the fact that the Earth ship and the Colonial Viper both used the same joystick, throttle, directional. That's not a steering wheel, but the joystick. It's the same thing. Okay, there's a little reuse there. On a quick side note, if you have listened to the Sneaks episode, you know that there was a rotting Earth Buck Rogers ship on the Universal Studios Hollywood backlot, and I actually sat in it. At 3 a.m, I threw out some of the trash that was in it, and I made myself at home for at least 15 minutes. And there was no throttle, no joystick, but there were some panels on the wall, and I could see through the cockpit window. So, yeah, I was able to live out that childhood fantasy of being in that spaceship. I've never been in an X-Wing, but I can say that I have sat in the Buck Rogers Earth ship. And it was pretty cool. It was close enough for me. But amidst all the sci-fi trappings of robots and aliens and laser guns and laser blasts and spaceships and hidden outposts on faraway worlds, there was another reason why we all tuned in to Buck Rogers. And that was Erin Gray. Erin Gray on Buck Rogers as Wilma Deering was so good looking and so beautiful that we couldn't turn away. Gil Gerard was great as Buck Rogers. He had the sarcastic smile, and the way he was always tormenting everybody with his primitive Earth ways was funny. But every time Wilma Deering showed up on screen, now she used to wear, when she was in official capacity, she wore like a tight white pants and this weird white sort of uniform top and a little helmet on her head. And she was beautiful like that. She was very reminiscent of Linda Carter in Wonder Woman. And we all watched that as kids. But where Erin Gray trumps everything is when she would appear in casual Wilma Deering clothing, which consisted entirely of spandex disco pants. Spandex disco pants, spandex disco tops, lycra spandex. And it was one of those weird things where even as a kid, I would ask myself, like, why is this so interesting to me? Why am I so into watching this? This is years before puberty. So I was confused, like, why do I like watching this so much? And I had the same reaction watching the Croft Superstars, because they had the Croft Superstars were this Saturday morning show that was all live action. And most kids my age, they didn't like live action. They went right for the cartoons. But I watched Croft Superstars because they had a segment on there called Electra Woman and Dyna Girl, which was basically Batman and Robin with women. And they wore these shiny spandex costumes, and they were always getting into trouble, just like Batman and Robin. So that was pretty early. And I would like race to the TV, and if you've listened to the Batman episode, you know that if Batgirl drove across the episode, I wasn't moving. But I would watch the Croft Superstars in hopes that they were going to air Electra Woman and Dyna Girl. And I couldn't figure out in my little child brain, like, why am I glued to the set? This is not what I'm supposed to be watching. This seems like a show geared at girls, like it's girl superheroes and they're fashion reporters. And why can't I move away from the set? So that was cemented with Buck Rogers, because Erin Gray, when she would walk out in those spandex pants, every kid, every guy, every heterosexual guy, your eyes became like disco balls. Like, they're rolling around in your head. Like, this is intoxicating. She's so good looking, and the outfit is so friggin' tight and shiny. So, I don't mean to spiral out of control here with talking about this, but most people won't talk about like the origins of what they find attractive. But because I remember everything so vividly, and I don't mind being honest, I can say that watching Erin Gray on Buck Rogers ingrained in me the ideal of what I found attractive, like in an instant. Like, that's it. I find that attractive, and I will find that attractive the rest of my life. And that's a weird thing to be able to pinpoint an exact moment like that. It began with Electro Woman and Dyna Girl, no doubt, and Batgirl, almost at the same time, and sort of continued with Wonder Woman. But really, it was Erin Gray on Buck Rogers. And you know what? Every guy my age listening knows exactly what I'm talking about, because we tuned into Silver Spoons hoping Erin Gray was going to come out in some sort of Buck Rogers-esque outfit. She never did, sadly. But there was an episode where Ricky and his friends are watching a porno, and her character, Kate, walks in, and one of the guys goes, "It's Kate." And the other guy goes, "Kate's in this movie?" And we all were like, yes, let Kate be in this movie. It's weird, man, because, okay, we're talking about prior to Return of the Jedi. Because if you ask a lot of guys what their sci-fi sexual awakening was, they're always going to point to Princess Leia in Return of the Jedi in the Slave Leia bikini, right? The Slave Leia bikini. Because if you're looking at my life, that was the year I was almost 12. So that's right before girls become important. And yes, watching Princess Leia take all her gear off and put on a metal bikini was a watershed moment, no doubt. But it was Erin Gray and Buck Rogers that was just so electric on the screen, because she wore a different color every week. She wore teal, she wore purple, she wore silver, and it was mind-boggling. And Glen A. Larsen, if you're watching from heaven, God bless you. And you knew exactly what you were doing. There's no, I don't know, they're just futuristic fabrics. No, they're not, and you know it. You know that, and you know what? Erin Gray knew it. When she zipped up those pants so tight she couldn't breathe, she knew she was pandering to every young boy in the audience. And there's nothing wrong with pandering. Look at 50 Shades of Grey coming out. That's the ultimate pander to middle-aged housefrows. So it's okay if Mr. Larsen was pandering to sci-fi kids everywhere. And I'm sure there were a lot of fathers who would sit with their kids and go, "You know what, son? I'll watch Buck Rogers with you this week." Secretly saying, "I'm watching it for Erin Gray." And the kid going, "Yeah, I'm watching it for the space stuff too, Dad." "I'm watching it for Erin Gray." So, did I just sort of make fathers and sons watching Buck Rogers together into some sort of gift of the Magi? I don't know. And this whole segment is dedicated to my friend Andy, who grew up the same way that I did, with all the same avenues that we explored, and who said that I I could never do an episode where I would talk so frankly about what Buck Rogers and Erin Gray and her spandex outfits meant to me. But I'm nothing if not honest on 91 Reasons. And Glen A. Larsen, because it was on TV and so available every week, he's the guy that that molded anything that I would think is attractive later in life. And how weird is that? How weird is it to look at a single guy's work and say, that's the guy that influenced the adult me? How weird is that? But that's what he did. And Buck Rogers, not to move past Erin Gray and her wardrobe, which is difficult to do, but we kind of have to if we want the show to continue. But Buck Rogers suffered the same fate as Battlestar Galactica, in that when Universal decided it was too expensive to produce, Glen A. Larsen simply said, well, we'll give you another season and it'll be much, much cheaper. So the final season of Buck Rogers, where he hooks up with Hawkman and they're not on Earth anymore, they're on a spaceship. So it's the opposite of Galactica. But it means that they're on a single set for most of the episode. They also fired Mel Blanc as Tweaky, or he left, and they got some hack to come in and do the voice, who's infinitely cheaper. They did add a second fussy robot. So now it was, with I bumped the mic. You need to take a drink? But with the fussy robot taking the place of Dr. Theopolis, the R2 and 3PO ripoff is now complete. Totally complete. But those that last season of Buck Rogers is not very good. When they're in syndication and it's one of those episodes, even Erin Gray's spandex wardrobe is not enough to get me to really stay tuned in. I might put it on for background, but I will not sit and watch intently. Thank you. But Glen A. Larsen, after Buck Rogers, would continue on with BJ and the Bear, which everybody loves, and Sheriff Lobo, which was really popular, and they're all rip-offs of movies, And then he would come up with some really popular stuff. Like, it's most TV producers hit their stride, and Galactica and Buck Rogers, $6 Million Man, that's hitting a stride. But Glen A. Larsen just kept going and going. I don't know what his personal life was. Aaron Spelling, who did Dynasty and 90210 and a million other big TV shows, we know that he lived in a house as big as a small city that had elevators, and elevators that took you to elevators in elevators, and elevators that had live-in butlers. We know that Aaron Spelling was a mega gazillionaire. I don't know what Glen A. Larsen's private life was, but after doing those three mega shows and all the smaller shows, and I say smaller only because they weren't on my radar, but they were still big shows, he would still go on to create Magnum P.I., Tom Selleck, Magnum freaking P.I., and Knight Rider, and Automan. But let's talk real quick. Magnum P.I., massive show. I'm looking at his IMDb page. Ran for 8 years. 152 episodes. That's a massive body of work. And Magnum P.I. was so good, it prevented Tom Selleck from being Indiana Jones. Because, he had the part. Lucas offered him the part. He was going to sign the contract to be Indiana Jones. And at the last minute, CBS said, no, he's going to be Magnum P.I. Now, I'm sure that Tom Selleck did very well on his 8 years of Magnum P.I., and I'm sure he's still doing well because it's still in syndication. But even like doing a show in Florida, in Hawaii, with a Ferrari and a helicopter, and as good looking and amazing as Tom Selleck's career was, he probably sits every once in a while and says, damn it, I could have been Indiana Jones. Because, same thing happened to Pierce Brosnan with James Bond. And NBC said, no, you're Remington Steele. But Pierce Brosnan got his shot. It only took a few more years. Selleck never got that shot. Never got to be Indiana Jones. Instead, he did High Road to China on his hiatus from Magnum P.I., a movie probably nobody even remembers, but is very Indiana Jones-ish, right? But Glen A. Larsen, Magnum P.I., again, they had a toy line. And, Knight Rider. He did Knight Rider. Every kid loved Knight Rider. I watched Knight Rider from the pilot when he was Michael Long before he became Michael Knight. Because, in the Knight Rider show, a different actor is playing Michael Long, the same character as Michael Knight, and he gets his face disfigured, so they give him reconstructive surgery, and he comes out of surgery as David Hasselhoff, so that now he's a man with no identity, and he can fight crime at the highest levels with the help of his talking robot car, right? Now, I did watch a lot of Knight Rider. I enjoyed the show a lot. Formulaic to the hilt. You knew exactly what was going to happen each episode. Kit's turbo boost and Kit's using his window as handcuffs, like they would put the bad guy's hands in the window and roll it up. A really fun, different show. Like he got a lot of it right, and a lot of us kids watched the front of the Knight Rider car, knowing that the red light going back and forth, well, isn't that just the same apparatus from the Cylons? I bet it is. So we knew that. And I even used to watch another show called St. Elsewhere that Glen A. Larsen didn't have anything to do with. But the guy who did the voice of Kit was on it. So I would just imagine like, oh, Kit's a doctor now on St. Elsewhere. It's the same guy. But Knight Rider was great. And Knight Rider had good character actors. The guy who played Devin, his sort of benefactor with the Knight Foundation, and I don't do a lot of homework on this stuff. I've got Larsen's IMDb page, but that's really about it. But the girl who played the mechanic on the first few seasons of Knight Rider, now she would eventually leave and then come back. But, she was so good looking. And she wore, like, mechanics coveralls. And she was the one who fixed the Knight Rider car. And think about that. Think about any flack that Glen A. Larsen took for making Princess Ardella wear a bikini in every episode of Buck Rogers. And Erin Gray's spandex wardrobe. Here he is on Knight Rider. And the smartest person in the room is the woman mechanic. She's the only one who can fix Kit. That says a lot. That's really cool. I don't know if he was ever given credit for that. For making a woman the smartest person around. You know what? I applaud that too. I don't think I applauded. I applaud the spandex lycra outfits of Erin Gray. Can we go back to that? Should I go back to that? The audience is going, the listener's like, please, Jeff, you've already killed us. You've knocked us over the head with it. Well, he also did a little show called Automan. I'm looking here. It only ran 13 episodes. And I can tell you, I watched every episode of Automan because Automan was just a ripoff of Tron. But it was on TV, and you could watch it on TV. So it was like free sci-fi. And as a kid, it was nothing better than free sci-fi. Because going to the movies took a lot of wrangling. You had to get your parents to take you. They had to pay for it. You had to then ask for popcorn, and then Coke, and the candy. Home, I'm sitting down in front of the TV. Leave me alone. Automan is on. Automan's catchphrase was, on a scale of 1 to 10, think of me as an 11. Automan had really good special effects. It had an amazing car. And I think the car was the same car. I'm going to have to look it up. It might have been the Star car from The Last Starfighter. I don't remember. But very similar, if not. But it lit up blue, and he also had a light-up helicopter, and they fought crime. It was really silly. And you know what? I'll find the intro credits to put on the Facebook page, because this is back when, gosh, it's weird to think now that opening credits for TV shows are like 25 seconds. You know, Lost, it was just the logo, and then the show started. You know, the show had already started. They're afraid you're going to tune out. You know, Walking Dead is probably the only show on TV right now, or Game of Thrones, that has a really in-depth, fun intro. And that's because, A, they got a big audience, they know you're watching, and B, with HBO, it's a pay service. So you're going to watch regardless, right? You're stuck. You're not going to tune away if you've paid for it. But back in the day, TV shows used the opening theme and the credits to set up the show in case you'd never heard of it before. You know, Knight Rider, A Dark Journey into the World of a Man Who Does Not Exist. Or Automan. Automan would give you his origin entirely in the credits, every episode. So on a 44-minute show, 2 or 3 minutes are already chopped right off the top with his origin every week. It'd be like tuning in to watch a Spider-Man show, and instead of just starting the show, every week they go, Peter Parker was bit by a radioactive spider and now has the powers of a spider. Like, oh my gosh, but that was how it was done back then. People's attention spans were longer, and they assumed that you were tuning in for the first time, so they were giving you a little primer on what the show's about. But Automan sadly only lasted a few episodes. But that didn't matter, because a guy like Glen A. Larsen had a dozen projects in the air at any given time. So at the same time he's doing Knight Rider, he's also doing Automan and this other thing called Masquerade, which was like Mission Impossible with a guest star every week, and the huge CBS juggernaut that was Magnum PI. But he was also, he in 1981 got together with his old friend Lee Majors to do The Fall Guy.
Well, I'm not the kind to kiss and tell, but I've been seen with fire up. I've never been with anything less than a 9. So fine, I've been on fire with Sally Field, gone past with a girl named Bo, but somehow they just don't end up as mine. It's a death-defying life I lead. I'd take my chances. I'd die for living in the movies and TV. But the hardest thing I ever do is watch my leading ladies kiss some other guy while I'm bandaging my knee. I might fall from a tall building, I might roll a brand new car, 'cause I'm the unknown stuntman that made Redford such a star.
Which was a really cool show about a movie stuntman who on his downtime acts as a bounty hunter for people who skip bail. And The Fall Guy, my friend Jonathan and I have had discussions about this. The Fall Guy and Greatest American Hero have the two greatest TV theme songs of all time, because they're different. They're songs on their own, and they fit the show to a T. And The Fall Guys theme song, The Unknown Stuntman, is such a great song. It's so good, and it's sung by the star of the show. And here again, we're gonna delve into the same territory as Buck Rogers, because The Fall Guy has this. It's this action show. It's a lot like the A-Team, where it's a different sort of weird criminal every week, and we're going to track him down, and we're going to uncover what's going on, and there's always going to be a car chase. There's usually going to be at least 2 or 3 explosions and gunfights, and we're telling our parents that we're tuned in because it has all these action elements that they know we're into and seem age appropriate. But hang on, because in the opening credits, Heather Thomas comes through those saloon doors in a little blue bikini. And as we're all getting older, we're seeing things that are seeming to be more important than explosions and car chases. And Heather Thomas, who to me was infinitely more important than Heather Locklear. To me, Heather Thomas was much more good looking than Heather Locklear, because even though Heather Locklear was on TJ Hooker and she was a cop, Heather Thomas had how do you put it? Like, her voice was almost tomboyish, but she was anything but a tomboy. And Glen A. Larsen knew, like, he hired her and he knew exactly what kind of outfits to put her in. She was always in tight jeans or like roller boogie, shiny shorts, or more importantly, there were a lot of bikini scenes. And it was the Fall Guy that spawned the Heather Thomas pink bikini jacuzzi poster, which for my generation was the number one poster on your wall. I've talked about this before. I don't remember what episode it was, but this was the first poster that I asked my mother for at Zodi's, and it was Heather Thomas in a pink bikini in a jacuzzi, and it says "Love and Laughs" with a fake signature Heather Thomas. And I remember my mom giving me that look like, you want a poster from Zodi's of a girl? And it took a lot of courage at that Zodi's checkout to go, yes, I want this poster, and I'm going to put this poster on the wall, because I was going to have to take down a poster of Luke Skywalker in order to put up a poster of Heather Thomas. So this was a rite of passage. This was a bona fide rite of passage into young adulthood of, I'm slowly going to put away childhood toys, in exchange for something a little different. Now, I do have that Heather Thomas poster on my wall. I'm looking at it right now, but I don't have a real one. I have the kind that you win at the local carnival, which is flat and smaller, because if you go on eBay and look up the Heather Thomas pink bikini poster, it's usually over $100 unless it's damaged, because every guy wants this poster back to recapture a little tiny bit of their young adult days. So I was lucky to find this. It was a swap meet find, and if you've listened to my other episodes, I love swap meet finds. I came up upon a guy who had an old army like Foot Locker trunk, and it was full of 80s posters. And I would have bought a few of them at $1 a piece. He ended up selling me the entire trunk with the posters for $3. And when I got home, there was at least 25 or 30 posters in there. Most of them were the kind that they hang up in liquor stores of girls with beer. Now, the difference is they were all 80s from the 80s. But a poster in a poster in a poster, I pulled out the Heather Thomas poster. And, I have a picture somewhere on my Facebook page of the moment I opened that poster. And I was so excited because it's so expensive to buy. So I got mine for literally nothing, because I ended up selling some of those other posters and quadrupling or quintupling my money so that the Heather Thomas poster was free. But Heather Thomas, man. Heather Thomas. And everybody that I knew went and saw Zapped because Heather Thomas was in it. Now, there is nudity in Zapped, but it's a body double. It's not her. I don't think she's ever appeared nude. But I'll let you in on a secret. A lot of guys my generation, nudity's not the ultimate thing, you know, and doesn't that sound funny to say? But in the group of guys that I was in, I was like I said, I was king of the nerds, and a lot of them would stumble upon or get hold of these what I call liquor store nudie mags, you know, like Beyond Playboy, Beyond Hustler, like We, and I don't even. What's the one that Homer gets from Principal Skinner in that episode, Swank. Like, those are really dirty magazines. Like, they go beyond just tasteful nudes into really just sort of blatant, over-the-top nudity. And you know what? That never did it for me. I never wanted to look at those magazines. And when guys would bring them over, like if we were hanging out, hey Tucker, you want to check it out? And like, no, not really. I have my Starlog, and I would open Starlog, and there'd be Erin Gray and her spandex pants, or I'm trying to think of some of the other ones that were back in the day, but like most sci-fi in the 80s, they dressed the women up in real weird spandexy, strappy outfits, and that's what always did it for me. I didn't need these really filthy magazines. The Heather Thomas poster is, to me, it's like it's the ultimate in sexy, and she's not naked. Naked is boring. Say it again. Naked is boring. Sci-fi and fetishy type stuff is infinitely more attractive because it leaves a little mystery and it leaves a little power. So, sorry to digress into that, but that's the contribution Glen A. Larsen made to my psyche. He gave me that appreciation for a clothed woman instead of just, well, everyone's got to get naked. To me, a one-piece swimsuit is infinitely more attractive than even a bikini, because it covers more and there's more imagination to it and more style and panache. And I don't know what that says about me. You can read into that however you want, but I thank Glen A. Larsen for doing that. And as he closed out the 80s, because I'm looking at The Fall Guy ran until 86, Magnum PI till 88. I'm looking at, there wasn't a lot for me past the 80s with Glen A. Larsen. It wasn't until they revived Battlestar Galactica, and I don't think he was involved in much of that at all. And I know that this is funny. If you look up Edward James Olmos right prior to the airing of the remake of Galactica, he went on record saying, if you're a fan of the original, you shouldn't tune in because they've changed it too much and you're not going to like it. And that gave me pause, because here's the lead of the show telling the fans not to watch it. But boy, was he wrong, because I'll tell you, Battlestar Galactica, the redo, was a masterpiece. Changing Starbuck into a girl to give her and Apollo that story arc and that conflict, boy, what a fantastic. And Katie Sackhoff, she rocked that part. I mean, she was just as good as Dirk Benedict. And that's saying something, because as you've heard earlier, I'm a Dirk Benedict fan. I saw Dirk Benedict and Dwight Schultz at Comic-Con signing at the Mattel booth, and I didn't get in line because I don't have time for that, but I was like, wow, that's Dirk Benedict. When I was a kid, he was the coolest guy on TV, and he's still pretty cool. So no, I really enjoyed the Battlestar Galactica redo. It faltered a little bit at the end, but when you're telling a story that grand, I don't know if you can come up with any solution, any resolution that's going to be as satisfying as the journey. Because the destination's not important. It's the journey that's important. And Galactica's journey was fantastic. I was riveted. And you know what? They wore tank tops and stuff. There was no spandex in that show at all. So what a bummer. What a bummer, man. But no, he did that. And they even revived Knight Rider briefly. It didn't do very well. They revived the Bionic Woman. Like, Glen A. Larsen's stuff is so iconic and weird, because he was accused of stealing a lot of his ideas from the movies. So we've come full circle in that they're going to start making movies out of the stuff he made out of movies, right? Inception. It's Glen Larsenception. And I would love, like The Rock, he should sign up to do a Fall Guy movie tomorrow. Get that theme song on the big screen and do the Fall Guy as a movie. Oh, heck yeah. That'd be the greatest. Who would they cast in the Heather Thomas role? I don't know. You know what? Cast Heather Thomas, because I bet she's still gorgeous. You know, she was so good looking. I bet she's still good looking. That's just the way women like that are. Like, look at Sophia Loren. She's just as beautiful now as she was back in the day. But, yeah, make the Fall Guy into a movie. Heck, make Knight Rider into a movie. Do a new Buck Rogers, because I've met Erin Gray at Comic-Con, and she is still as gorgeous now as she was back then. And if you're listening or you know Erin Gray, tell her at next year's Comic-Con she should wear spandex pants, and she will sell more autographs than she ever has before, because her and the spandex pants are what we remember most out of that show, and the spandex tops. She was covered head to toe in it. Nothing wrong with that. So I have a glass of water because I always keep one when I do a show. Sometimes you can hear me drinking like that. So I raise my glass and I toast a man, Glen A. Larsen, who worked tirelessly year after year to make TV for everybody. It wasn't highbrow stuff. It was stuff that anybody can relate to. It was action, motorcycle chases, car chases, shootouts, explosions, and of course, my phone is ringing during the show. During the tribute part. Hold on. There you go. I picked it up and I hung it back up. He had beautiful women in ridiculous costumes made of bikinis and metal and spandex and Cylons made of chrome and Dirk Benedict with his cigar. And the Fall Guy. And you know what, Mr. Larsen? A lot of people don't know your name, but those of us who do, we appreciated every minute of what you did for television. Even the stuff that didn't do very well. Like, I watched every episode of Manimal. They had a show called Manimal about a guy who could turn into an animal. So, of course, it was called Manimal. I watched it. And as a kid, I didn't know who Glen A. Larsen was, so I wasn't following his body of work. I was following things that he was making that was appealing to me. Action, intrigue, explosions, helicopters, narrow chases, and beautiful, beautiful women. God, Glen A. Larsen knew how to pick them, didn't he? All the girls on Battlestar Galactica, all the girls on Buck Rogers. Heather Thomas, we thank you for bringing Heather Thomas into our homes every week. There's an episode of The Fall Guy where they go for spring break to uncover some crime, and Heather Thomas is in a little bikini as Billy Ocean's lover boy plays. I watched that episode 1,000 times. God bless you, Mr. Larsen. And thank you for listening to an episode where I indulged a little bit of stuff that's probably only interesting to me. But I know there's some of you out there who are my age who got the vibe that Glen A. Larsen was putting out and the products that he was putting out. And he also put out toys. I mean, it's great that he did not only these great shows, but they had toys, because even the Fall Guy had supermarket rack toys, you know, and little Hot Wheels of his vehicles and stuff. So a big, big part of our childhood. And I briefly mentioned Sid and Marty Krofft and the Krofft Superstars. That they deserve their own episode. So eventually coming soon will be a full hour or longer on the Krofft Superstars and Electra Woman and Dyna Girl and all the spandex-clad superheroines that made me the man that I am today. Who am I? I am the voice you're listening to. I am Jeff Tucker. This is 91 Reasons. I'm going to thank you for listening by saying, if you really like the show, the best way to support it is to go on iTunes and give us a review. We're 11 5-star reviews and counting. Thank you to everyone who's given us a review. You can subscribe on iTunes. You can check us out on Podomatic, where this week we hit number 14 on the comedy listings and 487 on the overall listings, which is a massive jump. I cannot be more thankful to the people who are listening around the world to the nonsense that I spew out. I thank each and every one of you. I'm also the author of 3 books that are all available on Amazon.com. The Sixth Key, The Lost Station, and my newest book, The Infinite Backward, all available in paperback or as a Kindle download for 99 cents. If you're a member of Prime, Amazon Prime, you can get the download for free. Unbelievable. I'm hard at work on book 4 of The Ice Temple. It'll be out next year. I work on that in my copious free time. As you can tell, I have lots. I'm staring at Heather Thomas while I say this outro, and for a moment, I'm a kid in Zodi's begging for that poster. So if you ever run across a vintage Heather Thomas poster, and not the white bikini or the other ones, but the actual pink bikini jacuzzi one, and you want to send it to your old pal Jeff at the 91 Reasons, you let me know and I'll give you the address, because as great as this one is, it's not the real glossy one that I covet so much. Have I said enough about spandex? I'm so sorry if that is a turnoff to you, but it's not to me. This is Jeff Tucker, and you're listening to 91 Reasons.
Thanks for listening to 91 Reasons. Please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes. Find us on Facebook. Is anyone even still listening?
Well, I'm not the kind to kiss and tell, but I've been seen with Farrah. I've never been with anything less than a 9. So fine, I've been on fire with Sally Field, gone fast with a girl named Bo. But somehow they just don't end up as mine. It's a death-defying life I lead. I take my chances. I die for living in the movies and TV. But the hardest thing I ever do is watch my leading ladies kiss some other guy while I'm bandaging my knee. I might fall from a tall building, I might roll a brand new car, 'cause I'm the unknown stuntman that made Redford such a star. I've never spent much time in school, but I taught ladies plenty. It's true, I hire my body out for pay. Hey, hey, I've gotten burned over Cheryl Teague's, blown up for Raquel Welch. But when I wind up in the hay, it's only hay. Hey, hey, I might jump an open drawbridge or Tarzan from a vine, 'cause I'm the unknown stuntman that makes Eastwood look so fine.
1987, at the John F. Kennedy Space Center, NASA launched the last of America's deep space probes. The payload perched on the nose cone of the massive rocket was a one-man exploration vessel, Ranger 3. Aboard this compact starship, a lone astronaut, Captain William "Buck" Rogers, was to experience cosmic forces beyond all comprehension. An awesome brush with death. In the wink of an eye, his life support systems were frozen by temperatures beyond imagination. Ranger 3 was blown out of its planned trajectory into an orbit 1,000 times more vast. An orbit which was to return the ship full circle to its point of origin, its Mother Earth, not in 5 months, but in 500 years. For 500 years, Buck Rogers drifted through a world in which reality and fantasy merged into a timeless dream.
Far beyond the world I've known, far beyond my time. What am I? Who am I? What will I be? Where am I going? And what will I see? Searching my mind for some truths to reveal. What thoughts are fantasy? What memories real? Long before this life of mine, long before this time, what was there? Who cared to make it begin? Is it forever or will it all end? Searching my past for the things that I've seen. Is it my life or just something I dream? Far beyond this world I've known, far beyond my time. What kind of world am I going to find? Will it be real or just all in my mind? What am I? Who am I? What will I be? Where am I going? And what will I see?
This is Jeff Tucker, and you're listening to 91 Reasons, the home of shiny spandex.